In this video, I'm going to show you how to install airbag helper springs on the back of this Dodge Ram 2500. Let's get started. The airbag springs will go instead of the bump stops. I know the bump stop is missing on this truck. That's because it fell off, but that doesn't matter anymore because this is where we're gonna install the helper springs. Now, if you have a two-wheel drive model, this bracket here that comes off the frame, drops the bump stop down, will not be there. This will just be up against the frame, so it'll look a little bit different, but same procedure applies to the two-wheel drive and the four-wheel drive model. Having said that, let's remove this bracket here that would have the bump stop on it because we're going to install our own airbag bracket on here. Use a 15mm socket and remove these bolts. For me, it looks like someone put a mounting nut on there. Typically, the one that is in the frame should be welded on. This one is no longer welded on. Take this bracket off. Now let's install our new top bracket. I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize. If you don't have that, you can put a little bit of grease on here if you're worried about rust in between the two metal surfaces. And the bracket that you're going to want to mount on top is the one that has the larger center cutout. The bolts are the longer 6mm Allen-headed bolts. If you choose to replace your original ones, the kit does provide new hardware, which is great. I'm going to install it. If you want to reuse your originals, you can. Just going to thread this one on most of the way so I can hold that bracket on here and then install the rear bolt. Because my welded nut is missing, I'm going to just have to install the mounting nut that was already there. But that doesn't change anything. I'm still going to use the new bolt. Once again, 6mm Allen socket. Snug these up. Let's do the same to the rear. Torque these between 20 and 25 foot-pounds. I'm going to have to hold my mounting nut for this one. Now the airbag is going to face in different directions, whether it's on the driver's side or the passenger side. This here is the driver's side, so I'm going to face the airline towards the center of the truck. If it was this way, it'd be facing towards the wheel, which isn't really that great. Could get broken off by, well, the wheel or anything that gets caught in it. Having said that, the same thing applies to this lower bracket. On the driver's side, this cutout should be closer to the center of the truck. If it's on the passenger side, you flip it over this way. I'm going to bolt on the two first. So as you can see, if you center this bracket up, there's a bolt hole that it has to line up with the spring. Thread it on, but don't tighten it fully yet. I'm going to wait to do this until everything's installed. You're going to want to use the flanged bolt for this one. And what I'm going to do is just center this up so it's centered and even on the bracket. I don't want it facing in different directions. I want it all lined up. And you can put it slightly off center if that's the only way that it fits for you, but it should fit pretty well. Just center it up like that. Now let's put the top bracket on this airbag. It's the one with the smaller center cutout that just goes around the fitting for the line. You have these two 6mm Allen-headed bolts. Those are going to go through this bracket into the airbag so it can hold this on. And just like with everything else, you're going to want to make sure it's centered up and lined up. Start these by hand, and then we'll snug them up. There is a very slight amount of adjustment here, so just make sure it's centered. Now use a 7/32 Allen bit and tighten up these bolts. Now let's install this airbag onto the rear axle. And when you do this, of course, you want to make sure the airbag isn't touching the leaf spring pack here. And you have these long bolts that have a square cutout on top. When you drop them in, you want to make sure that this one that is towards the outside of the axle, the brake line goes around it, Whereas this one, towards the inner part, the brake line goes behind it. On the front side, that's not going to be a problem because there's no brake line. But of course, you're going to want to replicate this setup reversed on the other side, so the bolt that goes closer to the middle of the axle will have the brake line go behind it on the passenger side, and then same thing here, but over there. You also want to make sure that it's centered, not, you know, falling to one side or the other like this. This is fairly centered here. I can tweak the brake line a little bit after I clamp this on, but at this point, let's get the lower clamps and, well, clamp this on. Now let's put on these lower brackets here. Make sure they go on both of the bolts. You're gonna have some flat washers to install, and over the flat washer, it's gonna be a little tricky holding it all together, you'll have a nylock nut. There we go. Once you put this side on, it's not gonna fall apart, so it's gonna be a lot easier to put it on the other side. And once you do this, grab the other bracket and slide it over the other bolts. All right, let's tighten this up. 14mm socket, snug these up. Make sure you go back and forth so you tighten these evenly. Now let's torque them to 16 foot-pounds. Keep in mind these don't have to be bottomed out, they just have to be tightened to 16 foot-pounds. And once you've done that, evenly drive 100 miles, you know, after you're done with the install. And you're gonna wanna check all of these again after 100 miles. I'll just double check them all now. It's important that all of these are even. If you have one side that is clamped down tighter than the other side, that's not going to hold on very well. So once again, after we're done with the whole install, drive 100 miles and then check these again to 16 foot-pounds. Now do the same to the other side, install the airbag up to this point, and then we'll have to raise up the rear end evenly so we can clamp the top and the bottom together. I'm on a lift, so I'm going to use a pull jack underneath the center of the rear differential. If you're on the ground and you didn't even jack this up, then you probably aren't going to need to lift this much. Or if you have it jacked up, you're going to want to use a floor jack and basically raise up the rear end so we can, like I said earlier, line up the top and the bottom brackets and join those two together with a couple bolts. If you jack it up, I recommend putting something soft in between just so you don't damage the differential here. Now take the smaller, shorter bolts that have that cutout, square cutout at the top, stick them through the top, and then on the bottom, you'll need a washer and a mounting nut. Get these two clamped together. Once you get one side, you should have an easier time doing the other side. All right, let's tighten these up. 14mm socket, snug these up. As you tighten this, make sure the fitting at the top isn't getting crushed into the frame. All right, those are nice and tight. I'm going to torque these to 20 foot-pounds. There we go. And now do the same to the other side. Get these clamped on. Use a 14mm wrench now, get it in through the bottom here, and just tighten up the bolt that we left loose at the bottom. That's pretty tight right there. I'm not worried about it backing off. I mean, if it does, it'll make some noise. It shouldn't, because the bolt has little teeth on it that it'll grab on with, but it's not like it can go anywhere anyway because the axle's in the way. So at this point, this side is tight. Once again, do the same to the other side. Now remove your support if you had one here. At this point, all that's left to do with both sides installed is run the line, and the line comes with a couple of different fittings. This is just a little union that connects the left and the right together and brings it out into one main output or input. That then goes into this Schrader valve that you can attach anywhere. All of this actually you can attach anywhere. I recommend running the line along the frame or somewhere around the top of the bed here, just so that it doesn't get caught on anything. It can easily break off if a stick or a rock hits it. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, of course, like I said, you can attach any of this wherever you want to, wherever it's most convenient for you. Just make sure it's out of the way of everything. So what I am choosing to do is to have my union, my junction, over here somewhere attached to either this brake hose or wiring harness. And that will make it so that the driver's side line will just be a short one from the fitting up to this, and then that union will attach to the passenger side airbag. And then from here, I'll run my line all the way to the Schrader valve. So I'm first going to cut a piece of this line. Should come with a cutter. I'm just going to estimate my needed length here. I'm not too worried about it because I can always adjust. And I'm going to insert this line into the fitting, press it on all the way, and that's it. You don't have to do anything else. It just automatically locks in. At this point, I'm going to take this fitting, slide this in, just like that. And I'm not going to wire tie or permanently secure anything until the end so that everything can move around. Like I said, I want this somewhere around here. The other line can go in here, and then this one here. And then this one here can be the main input and output. So I'm just going to connect it like that. I will connect this later after I cut this line to size. And at this point, I'm just going to secure this with a wire tie on here, just so I can make sure that it is exactly how I want it to be and it won't move. Perfect. I'm running this line up and over the shock mount. I want it out of the way of everything. And I'm also going to run it above the this frame rail here. I'm planning on mounting my Schrader valve right here, just going to wire tie it. That's the easiest thing I can come up with, unless you want to drill a hole and mount it in any other way. This is just the trailer hitch here. So I'm going to take this cutter again, cut the line, take the Schrader valve, clip it in, just like that. And like I said, I'll mount it like this. This is going to be very easy to air up and air down, and the cap pointing down will ensure that no water will end up getting into that valve. So I'll take the wire tie and attach it. Just like that. Of course, I'm going to cut off the excess. At this point, this is all done, so you would just plug in your other airbag with the line, run it wherever you want, and then air it up, test it out, check for leaks. If there are any leaks, it's most likely going to be at these connections, so disconnect it, check it out, make sure that the cut is nice and flat. If the line isn't cut perfectly flat, it's going to leak. Other than that, take take it for a road test.